Hello guys, this video is about camera animation, specifically animating cameras around objects. After you set up all your objects and freeze transformations and get them ready for animating, you're going to want to set up your cameras first before you start animating. This is important because if you parent or group objects and cameras together, it could cause some issues if you add the cameras after animation. So make sure to do them first. I go ahead and set up a few cameras around my car just to have specific shots of my car and some shots of the drone behind it. After you're done setting up your cameras around your objects, you're going to want to start setting up your stationary cameras. Before you do that, I would suggest setting up an outline using the top perspective and just drawing an outline using one of the curve tools in the Curves and Surfaces tab. After you draw your outline, you should have a good idea where you want to place your stationary cameras, so go ahead and set those up. I decided to put a few at certain turns, stationary cameras that don't move, and I added a tower cam that is going to be constrained to aim at the car as it goes through the street. The way the aim works is that the camera will orient itself automatically to wherever the aim is located. So, you would move the aim to wherever you want the camera to orient itself to, and you would parent it usually to an object so that the camera always faces an object. To begin, you're going to want to move the aim to whatever object you're going to be constraining it to. Once it's there, you're going to want to shift select the object and then the camera and go to your animation mode and then go to constraints and then parent constraint. Next we'll be going over the rotation of the wheels and the blades for the drone. Essentially we want them to rotate 360 degrees in cycles, either looping or towards a certain point. You should begin by making the rotate X 0 degrees at the first frame, 180 degrees at the 15th frame, and 360 degrees at the 30th frame. Now, you do not want to make it 0, 180, 0, because then the tire is just going to go right back to 0 without making a full rotation. But in order to make it actually rotate correctly without having to write insane numbers like 720, you're going to want to put a 0 keyframe right after the 360. What this will do is it will reset the wheel to a 0 rotation, but the wheel won't look like it moved because 360 and 0 are essentially in the same space. But it will keep the tire rotating. So, when you go into your graph editor, now that you know exactly where you want your 0 to be after the 360, you can delete that, copy your 3 frames, and then paste them as many times as you need. Make sure you don't paste them over top the 360 at the end of each cycle. Now there is a way to make the animation loop forever, but I don't want to do that for mine since I have a starting position that has a speed of 0. So I'm going to copy and paste. If you want to loop it, it'll make it loop infinitely, which means that you have to start it driving already, which you could do if you wanted. If you're going to begin the animation like me, which is from a starting position, and then end it slowing down, you're going to want to take your copy and pasted cycle and move it somewhere in the middle of your animation. That way you have at least, I put 4 seconds of the tire speeding up and then 4 seconds slowing down at the end. You have your cycles where you want them to. You're going to want to add your keyframes for the beginning and the end. Because the car is going to be speeding up and then slowing down, you're going to want to make those curved. So make sure it's either splined or auto. Auto should make it curved on its own. And then for your cycle, so that the car doesn't look like it's speeding up and slowing down while it's driving, you're going to want to make all of those linear lines. So the layout should be curved rotation, linear cycles in the middle, and a curved rotation at the end. When we're setting up the drone blades, those are going to be looped because the drone is flying at my starting position. So, you're going to want to set up your keyframes just like the wheel at the beginning, a 0 to 360. In your graph editor, go to View, and then down at the bottom it should say Infinite. Check that box, then go into your curves, and it should say Pre-Infinity and Post-Infinity at the top. For both of those, you're going to want to click on them and go to Cycle. What that'll do is it'll cycle that 30 frame animation of them spinning infinitely before it and infinitely after that, in case you were going to move your timeline at any point. That should keep it looping forever. Now, when setting up the camera for the drone, I like to use a camera aiming up. What the up essentially does is it keeps the top of the camera oriented upwards towards wherever the up is located. This is helpful if you have the drone flying 360 around the car or through buildings, but you still want it oriented to the car itself. When you're moving the drone up and down, the camera may end up going sideways if you don't have an up. So the up helps the camera always orient itself straight. I went ahead and constrained the aim to my car so that it follows the car wherever it goes. That way I don't have to turn the drone if I don't want to orient towards the car. When you have your camera set up around your objects, you're going to want to parent them to your objects themselves. So go ahead and select the cameras and middle mouse drag them over onto the objects in the dialog. What this will do is it'll make the cameras move with the objects themselves, and you want to animate the cameras moving. Great, so now that we have our secondary animations for our tires and our drone set up, as well as our cameras, we're just going to want to start animating our car and drone. So, follow your outline and translate and rotate the car as needed. You're going to want to make sure you keep in mind the momentum of the car and how that comes into play with the turns. I find that when animating, ghosting is very important. It's a great tool to use when especially editing the turns to make them more realistic. If you don't remember where ghost is going to be under visualize in the animation mode. After you're done animating the turns for the vehicle, you're going to make sure that the front tires, because a car would be a front wheel drive, turn towards the direction the vehicle is going to be turning towards. when you're done animating, you're going to want to go ahead and just set up your depth of field on your cameras. You can do this before your animation, but I like to do it after. That way I have a sure distance on where the car is. In your attribute editor for your cameras, you should be able to scroll down to a tab that says depth of field, enable the depth of field, and then use focus distance and f-stop to control how far the depth of field goes and how much it blurs out. Now, to get a good idea of where the object is for your depth of field, you're going to have to go to your display, go to your heads up display, and look for object details. Turn that on, and then it'll bring up some text in your right hand corner of your viewport. If you click on the object through the camera, it should tell you the distance from the camera, and then you can use that to set the focus distance, and then use f-stop to gauge how blurry you want objects to be close and far. So when you're finished doing your animation and you have your camera set up and everything's good to go, you're going to want to either Playblast or render it. Rendering will take a very long time because this is a long animation. So I would suggest Playblasting it just to test it and turn it. Make sure that the resolution and the render settings are set to HD 1080p if you're going to be using those for the quality of the Playblast. If you were to render it, you would edit the renderable cameras in the render settings to make sure that all the cameras that you have set up in your scene are renderable. Great, so when your render settings are where you want them to be, you're going to want to go to Playblast, which is under Playback, and go ahead and set up the settings that you normally would, which is quality, use the render settings, scale 1, frame padding 2, 4, 1. Now, because this is a long animation, more than likely if you use AVI as the type of file and then none as the encoding, it will create an extremely large file. More than likely, if it's too large, it will become corrupted and you can't use it in any other software. So what I would suggest is that if you're on a Mac, switch the type of file to a Qt and then switch the encoding to an H.264. This will make sure that the file is small and high quality. If you're on Windows, it will not have QuickTime. So what you're going to want to do is go ahead and follow the link in the description that will bring you to instructions to download the QuickTime Essentials, which you'll want to download, but not the QuickTime Player, which will cause vulnerabilities. The QuickTime Essentials have the encoding for an H.264, and after that, you will be able to create a H.264 in your Playblast as well. Great, so now we have all of our animations playblasted. We can go ahead and go into Premiere with our videos. So go ahead and just import all of your videos, and then when you have them all set up, you're going to want to take the razor tool, which just looks like a razor blade, in your tool section on the bottom, and just start cutting your videos up to get the movie that you want. In order to view certain sections without the other sections getting in the way, just so you can cut them appropriately, you can also click on the eyes in the bottom to turn the channels on and off. This would be a good way to decide which sections you want to cut and which not to. When you know which section you want to keep in, go ahead and cut all the others around that section and just have that one section shown. That way you can end up turning on all the visuals for the cameras and it won't get in the way. Great, so you should be finished with your video now. After you have it all put together, you're going to want to go and export the video from the File tab. When you export it, just do H.264 so that the file size is small, and then export it, and it should take probably under a minute. For your assignment specifically, you don't need as many cameras as I have, you only need one per vehicle and one stationary camera. But if you want to get as many angles as I do, you may want to add more cameras. Alright, good luck.